You're listening to Wes Way Out West on demand. Content from Town Square Media's 99.9 KEKB in Grand Junction, Colorado. Well, thank you so much for letting me be a part of your morning today. From the Carville's Auto Mart Studios, you can reach us at 243-3699. You can open the KEKB mobile app and use the app chat feature to chime in on today's topic, 1971's epic prank at Lincoln Field. Front and center at KEKBFM.com and on our mobile app. You can follow along today as we retrace what happened October 7th, 1971 at Stalker Stadium, Lincoln Field, the night the lights went out for the homecoming game and the Grand Junction Tigers were ready to rumble but left in the dark. Now, how did we stumble across this? It's not football season anymore, but we were in the archives with the Museum of the West, just looking at historical things that happened in Mesa County. And here's this little note on the timeline at the museum about a prank at Lincoln Field. And just a little footnote about how all the lights went out that night at the field. And as we were scrolling through the timeline looking for some other historical fun tidbits about the Grand Valley, a couple of us were not familiar with the prank. Maybe we just moved here over the last few years, or if you weren't around in the 70s, you may not have heard much about it. But a prank that went over so well, not only did they have to cancel the homecoming football game, which was a huge game that year. Plenty of people have spoken up as we've been putting feelers out and researching this, that yes, there were hundreds of people standing around in the dark at the field hoping for a football game, and they got zipped that night, had to wait till the next day. We're going to talk more about the prank and what happened. We're going to read a ton of your comments as they continue to roll in this morning. I see a few coming in on the app right now from people who have remembered it, the 1971 prank at Lincoln Field. Let me go to the phone real quick.
Hey, this is Mary. I'm just calling to say thanks for all the chances to win cash. And I was hearing you talk about the old prank.
Yes,
and my parents used to talk about that all the time.
I love it, Mary. Thanks so much for calling. So it was people in your family talking about this game in 1971 as you grew up. So is this like Dad's broken record? Every dad's got one. Was this something your folks talked about a lot?
All the time. Anytime there's a high school football game,
yep.
They got to bring up, remember that time? Because we passed by and there were no lights on. There were all these people.
Oh, wow.
And,
so they saw it.
Yes, they saw it.
And probably wondered like everybody else did because like some of the comments that we'll get to here, people didn't know what was going on. They thought that it was a utility problem.
Yes, that's what they say. You know, it gets bigger and bigger every time they tell it. But
yes, there's a new part to the story every time you hear it.
But yeah, I grew up hearing all about it. I never did find out what happened, but he did say the next day that Grand Junction won 41-0.
As it turned out, there would be no football game for Coach Stoneburner and the Tigers that night, and the fans in the stands who stood around in the dark all that time were later told they would have to go home for the night. Coming up, we're going to get to the bottom of what actually happened. What caused the lights to go out? Who done it? Which I don't know that we'll ever prove. More of your memories about that night at 243-3699 on our mobile app with the app chat feature, right there on our website with an article that tells the entire story so you can follow along. KEKBFM.com. If it's fun and happening in the Grand Valley, we're probably going to talk about it here on Wes Way Out West. Imagine the crowd pouring into Stalker Stadium for the big Friday night homecoming game, October 7th, 1971. Coach Stoneburner and the Grand Junction Tigers are ready to rumble. As part of the story that's at KEKBFM.com, I wanted to thank John, who has sent me an email with a written account of the prank at Stalker Stadium, which was published years ago in the Grand Junction Daily Sentinel. It was written by the late Kathy Jordan, who did a great job of telling the story. And you can still see much of her incredible work on the online archives of historic7thstreet.org, a really cool site for Western Colorado history and the people who lived here and worked on it and wrote it up for us to enjoy. Kathy's story does a great job of talking about what happened at Lincoln Field that night. As I was not there, we have included links to her original story in the article that is at the top of our Facebook wall here at the top of the hour this morning and found on the app and at KEKBFM.com. Bottom line on what happened that night, the culprits are said to have hung around the field for a day or two, and they used stilts to climb up 8 stories above the ground to unscrew all 128 light bulbs, just enough so they wouldn't come on for the football game. I mean, boom, right? Somebody could have really been hurt doing this, but it all went under the radar. Questions remain today. Did anyone see them doing this? Could anyone have stopped them? Or was it the sleeping guard, The 1971 homecoming game had to be played the following day because both teams and most of the fans who had hung out in the dark for over an hour while technicians tried to work on the issue could not get it fixed, and nobody knew that someone had screwed around with the light bulbs. Now, on the sideline, Coach Stoneburner's spider sense is going off. He sees men flipping switches on and off. The lights aren't coming on. Meanwhile, on the other side of the field, the Bengals have driven all the way up from New Mexico to play Grand Junction that night. They were from Gallup, New Mexico. The late Sam Simplizo actually paid for the entire visiting team to stay in a hotel because they weren't going to have a game that night. What a mess. Your comments on what happened that night. Head to KEKBFM.com. Open the article, The Prank at Stocker Stadium. The article is titled, The Story Behind One of Grand Junction, Colorado's Best All-Time Pranks. Comments are in the photo gallery in that article. Nola, good morning. Thanks for chiming in. Nola says, I think it was the homecoming game for Grand Junction. It was postponed. The next prank in following years included writing bad words on the field in front of Central's stands in white lettering. Nola, thank you. Thomas says, it was the greatest prank ever. I was there. I'm a Tiger. I still got to hand it to those Central boys, but that was badass. Now, Thomas's comment about Central, I can't tell you whether that is or is not the case. There are all kinds of people being blamed in these comments for what happened, so it's fun to flip through them when you come into the article. Larry, good morning. Greatest prank ever. It was 1971's homecoming. I will never forget it. Don says, I remember the prank well and believe I know who did it. But if so, the perpetrators have never divulged their participation. Thank you, Don. Carol, good morning. Great stories, great memories. Coach Stoneburner was one of my social studies teacher, or maybe it was my history teacher in 1967. Carol, thank you. Renee says Coach Stoneburner still speaks of this. I wish we could get him to dial up. Maybe we can follow up and get a way to get some of his comments if he's available. Jack, good morning. Jack says, I drove by the stadium that night. It was packed with people. It was eerily dark. I heard rumors that it was a high school student that actually spent the day acting like he was with a maintenance company, climbed all the light stanchions, and unscrewed every light bulb. Can you believe it? These are your memories. You guys are filling in the gaps on this. I love it. Kathy says, I remember this story. It happened during Grand Junction's homecoming weekend, and the game had to be played the following Saturday afternoon instead of Friday night. Here's Kathy again saying there were 5 kids from Job Corps that admitted to the prank. Again, unfounded, can't confirm that, but I love the little bits of speculation in our comments here. Susan says, I may have heard a confession once, but if I told you, I'd have to kill you. Social media police. She says, that's a joke, but I've heard stories. Thank you, Susan. Can you imagine what it must have been like to be the person that was, answering the phone at the utility company that night? And the people at the field saying, we're trying to play our homecoming football game. Get these lights working. And the person on the other end, well, everything is fine here. Nobody knew that somebody risked their life climbing 8 stories above the field to unscrew the light bulbs. That must have drove everybody nuts that night, not being able to fix it because they didn't know it was a prank going on. Everybody was sent home. The Bengals went to their hotel, and everybody came back to Stocker Stadium, Lincoln Park, Lincoln Field, on Saturday to play the game. Now, going back to Kathy Jordan's account in the Sentinel, following the game right away, law enforcement and Grand Junction authorities went to the field and removed the pegs that were on the light stanchions from the ground all the way to the 40-foot mark. That way, nobody is going to be able to climb up the pegs and get up the stanchions again to prank another football game. Now you've got to have a little, truck with a crane and a bucket, and up they go. They took the pegs off. And now the next time that you drive down 12th Street in Grand Junction and look over at that field, take a long look at those light stanchions. Pretty much still the same. I'm told the parking situation is definitely the same at Lincoln Field. I can walk there from where I live, so I have not have to worry about the parking. But one thing I would absolutely love, has anybody got photos of the event that night? I would love for you to open our station app, hit the photo video submission button, even if it's everybody standing around in the dark. If you've got memories or comments on this, we'd love to have you open the app chat and let us know this morning. Next, we'll take a look at what happened the following day, the results of the game, and why this strange and weird and probably annoying prank that night anyway made its way into the archives of the Museum of the West. Because when fun, weird, strange things happen in a community, they absolutely should be recorded on timelines like this. Otherwise, who would remember such a prank? What happened on game day coming up with 99.9 KEKB and Wes Way Out West. On top of the Facebook wall this morning, you'll find the story behind one of Grand Junction, Colorado's best all-time pranks. We've been telling you about it this morning. The prank at Lincoln Field, which occurred the evening of October 7th, 1971. So the crowd dispersed. Everybody's got to go home. There'll be no homecoming game tonight between the Grand Junction Tigers and the Bengals from New Mexico. But you better believe that Coach Sternberner had the Tigers ready for Saturday. And everybody came back the next day to Lincoln Field. Grand Junction was not happy missing out on their homecoming game and having to play on a Saturday. They absolutely came out and crushed the Bengals. 40-0 was the final score. I had to look that up real quick. Meredith, who called earlier, said it was 41-0. 40-0, close enough. The Tigers celebrated. The Bengals had the long ride back to Gallup, New Mexico, but at least a story for their classmates. By the time the game was over on Saturday, there were still all kinds of questions about what exactly happened with the lights. On Friday night, the only way they found out someone had messed with the bulbs was bumping into one of them. And some of the lights just blinked real quick. And they realized the bulbs were all loose by just a turn and a quarter just to make it loose enough to where it wouldn't light up. How was it someone knew that they could climb up the stanchions and unscrew the light bulbs? Who thinks of that, first of all? Now, as we read to you in the comments that we got from the audience, Thomas saying it was people from Central. And that may very well be the case. I just can't confirm that, responsibly. Others say it was a high school student. Julie, my mom, told me about it. She remembered this. Thank you, Julie. Christopher says, I remember hearing my folks talk about it, but it was 19 years before I was born. See, again, thanks so much to the Museum of the West for keeping this in the archives so that folks who, like us, came along after this prank could go back and actually look at what happened. Kathy, again, saying it was the kids from Job Corps. Again, can't confirm, but there are plenty of people ready to peg who it was who did it that night. Let's go to the phone one more time. KEKB, good morning.
Hi, this is Lee.
Lee, it's the prank at Lincoln Field, and we've been reading people's comments about what they remember. Some secondhand information. Some people were there and actually saw it. What do you remember about the prank at Lincoln Field, Lee?
Well, I wasn't there and didn't see it, but I've heard stories about it.
This thing is a legendary prank in town, isn't it? I mean, people talk about it all the time.
Yeah, I've heard so many stories about it, and I just don't understand how somebody can go up there and do all that without being noticed.
Yes, thank you so much for bringing that up, Lee. How did they do it? And it's a question, I think, there are several different people out there, and you can go and read these comments on our Facebook wall right now, that are stone cold laying the blame on specific people. These guys did this. Nobody can prove whether or not these alleged, people that have been accused of doing this actually did it, but it does seem kind of unbelievable that in broad daylight, people could climb up those giant light stanchions around the field without being noticed, and then almost like a crazy person, methodically screw the light bulb just enough so that it wouldn't come back in and the lights wouldn't come on. I think, Lee, you bring up a great point. It's almost unbelievable if it hadn't been for hundreds and hundreds of people being there to witness it. And then, no arrests and no charges after the fact. And, of course, we know what a big deal the Grand Junction homecoming football game is to the school and the community. And, it was serious stuff. You didn't prank the whole town during the football game. People were all kinds of bent out of shape. Lee, thanks so much for calling and listening to us remember this odd little moment in Grand Junction history, but one that I think is fascinating and people love to hear about. Thanks for calling.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for taking my call.
Well, as Larry said in one of the comments, the greatest prank ever. 1971 homecoming. We'll never forget it. I sure hope if you enjoyed this morning and you have some pictures of the night that this happened, that you might drop by and submit those with our mobile app. Or reach out at KEKBFM.com. We would love to revisit this with some visuals for you. Thank you for your comments at 243-3699 in the app chat feature on the KEKB mobile app. And for following along with the story at KEKBFM.com. We are the Grand Valley's #1 for new country, 99.9 KEKB. This is Wes Way Out West.